If there's any area that scammers and con artists are known to flock to, it's finance. There's a seemingly infinite number of ways to deceive people into giving you money by promising them more of it. Get-rich-quick schemes, pyramid schemes, day trading schemes, multi-level marketing, you name it, and there are thousands of people right now trying to scam you through these methods. Unfortunately for the criminals of the world, a large portion of the population has wisened up to their methods, and won't fall for the same grifts that have been running for decades at this point. What they've been sorely in need of is a new area to scam people in, which the average person has no technical knowledge of. A new set of deceptive tactics that people aren't familiar enough with to recognize. A novel invention with plenty of buzzwords to spew at victims should they ever start noticing inconsistencies. What they've been needing are cryptocurrencies. Crypto as a technology is roughly 10 years young, and it's still a relative Wild West with no rules or regulations. That's where its utility comes from, but it also makes it alluring as a tool for unsavory individuals. Countless scam coins have gained notoriety over the years, whether they be simple rug pulls or billion-dollar catastrophes. As for the people responsible for such crimes, these are the stories we're going to hear today, as we dive deep into the world of crypto degenerates. Typically, when we're talking about the top brass of the financial world, especially crypto, there aren't that many women to go around. Unfortunately, the patriarchy just isn't ready for the girl boss utopia quite yet. Nevertheless, some brave mavericks managed to fall through the cracks in the glass ceiling. One of them is Ruya Plamonova Ignatova. Born in 1980, Ruya is native to Bulgaria, a country often described as the poorest, most miserable member state of the EU, and also home to none other than yours truly. That's right, Turkey Tom is a Bulgarian export. Perhaps that's why the country is so damn miserable. This is relevant because, partially due to Bulgaria being a Soviet ally up until 3 decades ago, it has a legacy of mob-related corruption that it's still wrestling with. The country is a hotbed for all kinds of criminality, with one kind in particular consistently outcompeting the others: scamming. Criminal activities like robbery, extortion, and drug trafficking are difficult to pull off, and often involve violence. Scamming people, on the other hand, can be done from a safe distance, and if you're good enough at deception, people will literally trip over themselves to hand you their money, time and time again. At 10 years old, Ruya moved to Germany. Despite information about this period of her life being relatively scant, it's been verified that she got a PhD in private international law from the University of Constance in Germany in 2005. What is less substantiated are the intermittent claims about her simultaneously studying economics at the University of Hagen or her having studied at Oxford. Though not impossible, these assertions are at least questionable considering there's no proof of them besides her resume. The Oxford claim is especially dubious since it's exactly the kind of place people like to name drop to instantly give themselves credibility. It's likely that it was in college that she met her husband, Bjorn Strell, considering he's also a lawyer. After getting her law degree, she went on to work at McKinsey & Company, a management consulting corporation which seriously upgraded her resume. If you don't know, McKinsey is the kind of company that no one's heard of, but somehow ends up owning like half the real estate on the planet or something. As the Bulgarian consultant for McKinsey, she managed Bulgaria's largest asset management fund, Clever Synergies Investment Fund, which, as of 2021, manages over $2 billion and is run by the ex-spouse of Bulgarian Prime Minister Boyko Borisov, who is well known for his alleged ties to organized crime. As the saying goes, there are two kinds of people in the corporate world: those who get caught scamming people and those who don't. Ruya turned out to be the latter. In 2012, a cast iron factory that she and her father co-owned was sold to a man named Rudolf Keller. Within 2 weeks of the sale, Rudolf filed for bankruptcy due to the fact that the previous owners, Ruya and her dad, had already been dismantling the operations of the factory and pocketing the resulting money, none of which was communicated to Rudolf. They sold a company that was on its deathbed as if it were still doing well, and because of this blatant act of fraud, Ruya was given a suspended sentence of 14 months. Any sensible person would be wise enough to not engage in this sort of thing ever again, so as to not land themselves in hot water. But you see, Ruya is simply built different. Her aforementioned resume even cites this event as Dr. Ruya saves the Waltenhofen casting plants. Obviously, the parts about her being convicted of 24 counts of fraud aren't included. Just a year later, the world is greeted with another one of Dr. Ruya's exploits, figuratively and literally. A crypto business operating out of Hong Kong called Bitcoin was founded by a man named John Ing. Bitcoin's marketing pitch was that it would be the next Bitcoin. This was 2013, so every new cryptocurrency made that same exact claim to try and cash in on the grassroots popularity of Bitcoin. However, the difference for Bitcoin was that it had an MLM aspect to it. MLM, multi-level marketing, is what many see as a workaround for a pyramid or Ponzi scheme. Whereas in a pyramid scheme, you get paid for how many people you recruit, and in MLM, you get paid for how many people you hire to sell a semi-unrelated product, which is technically legal. Eventually, a company called Prosper Limited got involved with the project, and one of the people who came along as a consequence was the lady of the hour, Ruya. The scheme ran its course, and when it got big enough, Ruya delivered a speech in 2014 breaking the news about the next stage of Bitcoin, called Crypto Real Investment Trust. First, she said that Bitcoin tokens could be converted into real assets, which people were already asking for. Then, she qualified that these real assets were shares of the company that issued the Bitcoins in the first place, meaning they were only available as long as the money kept coming in and the company continued to succeed. But they weren't backed by any commodities or products that gave them material value. To put it bluntly, they were virtually worthless and unusable, and the internal value of them, which was previously artificially inflated, crashed to nothingness, and the shares of Crypto Real remain pending to this day. Within a month of this fiasco, they created another cryptocurrency called BNA, which was supposed to save Bitcoin, but also crashed upon release. At this point, the people from Prosper Limited, including Ruya, recognized it to be a game of diminishing returns. Even for a scam, it was far too shifty. Obviously, this didn't mean they'd stop scamming people altogether, it just meant they would look for a better scam to rake in money from people worldwide, instead of just shafting random Chinese people who didn't know any better. With this wretched goal in mind, a prototype for their new project was created, called Sabway. It had the same structure as the previous MLM scam, with ranks and levels based on how many people you could trick into buying in. Eventually, the Sabway name was abandoned in favor of OneCoin, and that was the name it became infamous under. Though Bitcoin didn't quite go the way of the dodo, rebranding as Bitcoin Bao, which is still tradable to this day, it was permanently banned by the Prosper people, as they went all in on OneCoin. This time, they were wise enough to know that, if they were to go public and be matched against other, real assets, the same thing would happen. To stave off the coin crashing into nothingness when people found out it's virtually worthless, one of the premises of the coin was the concept that OneCoin would not go public until 80% of the OneCoins had been mined, so to speak. This meant that the scam could potentially go on for much longer, and consequently, they could rake in exponentially more money as more people fell for it over time. At least in Bulgaria, the Financial Supervision Commission had already taken notice of the rise of crypto scams and actually cited OneCoin by name as a big example. This happened in 2015, within a year of the coin's launch. Unfortunately, due to the insular nature of information originating from foreign or non-English speaking cultures, this info did not spread as well as it should have. However, one consequence of this conflict with the Bulgarian government was that OneCoin lost access to their original bank accounts in Bulgaria, which was a red flag to potential investors who became suspicious as to why that was. It took another year or so, but other countries, namely Finland, Sweden, Norway, Latvia, Italy, and Hungary, all started taking measures to stop the operations of OneCoin, whether by simply ordering them to cease promoting their products or straight up debanking them. In China, which up until that point was the bread and butter of OneCoin, multiple people associated with the company were arrested and over $30 million worth of assets were seized. The walls were closing in. For a while, OneCoin held on to a remnant of their status of financial normalcy, since at least they still had their bank accounts, in Tanzania of all places, processing the wire transfers they were receiving from their victims. Eventually, though, this account too was shut down, which marked a turning point for the people behind OneCoin, who realized the pressure was on and their scheme was living on borrowed time. One government after another was catching up to their trail of breadcrumbs of shell companies. But these negative resolutions from governmental institutions hardly meant a dead end, as by 2017, OneCoin had reached 175 countries and was estimated to have pulled in anywhere between 4 and 13 billion pounds in total. The horizon of selling the coins for profit, even if completely hypothetical, was a major selling point, especially as they would artificially value the coin at whatever price they wanted to impress new investors. Ruya gave speeches all over the world promoting OneCoin, recruiting people ranging from rich American and Chinese investors all the way to villagers in Uganda. One of the promises they'd made was that, upon 30% of the total amount of coins being generated, they would create some kind of internal trading mechanism at OneCoin, and that hundreds of thousands of third-party merchants were ready to start taking OneCoin as a currency. Of course, this milestone came and went, and no such thing happened. There wasn't even a formal announcement that it wouldn't happen. They just quietly pretended they hadn't said anything about it. Despite this being a clear bad omen, it wasn't enough to dissuade all investors from waiting with bated breath for the moment the company would go public and they'd be able to cash in. Meanwhile, more countries started closing their financial doors to OneCoin. Croatia issued a warning about the coin, then India had 18 people arrested for promoting a OneCoin event, followed by the seizure of 9 bank accounts and $3 million. However, they'd quickly come to find out that right before seizing the accounts, over $10 million were transferred out. This wasn't the first time this story played out either, as when China seized OneCoin assets, it seized 30 million out of an estimated total of over 90 million. The OneCoin top brass seems to consistently be one step ahead of the authorities. Within 1 month of these, seizures in India, Germany, Thailand, and Belize followed suit and essentially made OneCoin illegal. What people didn't expect is that Ruya had a backup plan. She had bought a very large property in central Sofia, the capital of Bulgaria, through a shell company called One Property. This company was owned by another one called Risk Limited, which in turn was managed by another company called Paragon, which was owned by another company called Artifix, which was owned by Ruya's mother, Veska. While the investors had nothing concrete to show for their stake in OneCoin, Ruya had turned her earnings into a maze of assets that was effectively uncrackable. Financial authorities could try to follow the money, but they'd run into wall after wall of carefully placed nothing burgers. Despite how it appeared though, Ruya wasn't the mastermind of this operation. If anything, she was little more than the face of OneCoin, a patsy to divert attention from the real people behind it. In October 2016, Ruya hired Bjorn Björk, a known blockchain expert and early adopter of Bitcoin, to be the chief technical officer of OneCoin, with a salary of 250 euros. This looked like a genuine offer at face value, but when Bjorn began communicating with Ruya's assistant, he found out what this offer was actually about. In an interview, he roughly recalls how the conversation went. Bjorn, what is my job going to be? What are the things that I'm going to have to do for this company? Assistant, well, first of all, they need a blockchain. They don't have a blockchain today. This reply shocked Bjorn, as cryptocurrencies are defined by their blockchain. There being no blockchain meant that the entirety of the company was a fraud. There was truly no OneCoin to speak of. Immediately, he started talking about this publicly, and to his surprise, he was met with death threats. On an interview he gave to a Norwegian television channel, he'd say, "When you talk about the amount of money that's been put into OneCoin, of course there's people out there that are pissed off and would do anything to shut anyone like me up. If I knew what I would have to go through, I would never have blown the whistle. I would have just turned my back and walked away. I can't discuss who's really behind the threats. It starts to get very, very, very scary, very, very, very fast." Björk went on to imply that Ruya herself never expected or intended for OneCoin to become so big, but that she had been compelled to keep it going by dark forces. What did he mean by this? Well, despite OneCoin supposedly being a global company, much of its money was siphoned into property deals and shady companies in Bulgaria, usually associated with politicians, businessmen, and even mobsters. One of the people directly connected to Ruya's real estate acquisitions in Dubai was the girlfriend of the Bulgarian cocaine king, who was taken out in 2016 by unknown assailants. Another of Ignatova's properties were transferred to the companies of Emil Hersev, a financier who used to run the Bulgarian National Bank. Safe to say, Ruya was not acting alone here. She had a complicated network of individuals helping. As international law enforcement agencies began closing in on her, Ruya set her contingency plan into motion. Unbeknownst to everyone but her inner circle, this plan had been hatched all the way back in 2014. Leaked emails revealed that her exit strategy in case of impending legal action was to take the money and run and blame someone else for it. Surprise, surprise, that's exactly what she did. Just as OneCoin was at the peak of its controversy due to investors growing increasingly frustrated with the unending flow of excuses that postpone their ability to withdraw their money, a speech was scheduled in October 2017 where, supposedly, Ruya would soothe all of her doubts. However, Ruya failed to show up, which was alarming since she was known to be punctual. Simultaneously, calls and text messages to Ruya started going unanswered. Despair set in. Surprisingly, OneCoin kept chugging along as the police scrambled to find Ruya Ignatova. A year later, her partner in OneCoin, Sebastian Greenwood, was arrested in Thailand and extradited to the US, where he was charged and pled guilty to wire fraud and conspiracy to launder money, facing a sentence of up to 60 years in jail. According to Pacer, his attorney was also responsible for the legal defense of John Gotti Jr. and El Chapo. How fitting. In the same year of 2018, Mark Scott, another one of Ruya's co-conspirators, was arrested for money laundering to the tune of over $400 million, though he was released on a $2.5 million bond in the same month. Later on in 2019, Ruya's brother, Konstantin, who had taken up the OneCoin mantle, was also arrested by FBI agents. A recording of him in a conversation with another co-founder surfaced, wherein he claimed that the organization wouldn't work with intelligent people, and that it specifically targets idiots, as he called them, who have no idea how the technology works. Because of this precarious position, he pled guilty and offered information in exchange for witness protection for him and his family. Despite having publicly signaled that he was still in touch with Ruya during court hearings, Konstantin clarified that this was just to keep OneCoin marginally afloat. Additionally, after Ruya's disappearance, he described receiving death threats and even being accosted by criminals over OneCoin. In March 2018, when I wanted to go back to my car after working, somebody put a gun to my back and I was forced into a minivan. Then I was taken out to the suburbs of Sofia, where I got beaten up, a finger of mine was broken, and a gun was pointed at me. I was told if Ruya disappeared with the money, that these people would come back and kill me, and if I went to the police, that they would cut a body part out of me. Later the same year, I got a call from a person who identified themselves as a high-ranking member of the Hells Angels, telling me I have to come to Zurich, Switzerland, to answer him and his business partner's questions. If I didn't come, he said it would end badly for me, where I ended up with them in a hotel room. Again, a gun was pointed at me. This time it was stuck in my mouth. I was told that I had to make sure that every promise made to them would be fulfilled, and they told me that the money they invested into the company is worth far more than my life. As for Ruya herself, her whereabouts are still unknown to this day. The mansions, penthouses, and yachts that she owns are sprawled about the world, completely vacant. In 2019, she was charged in absentia, meaning without her presence, with wire and securities fraud, as well as money laundering. US authorities would find out her last official flight destination was Athens, and after that, radio silence. Igor Alberts, the main connection between OneCoin and the MLM world, suggested that she had both Russian and Ukrainian passports, and often traveled between Russia and Dubai, meaning she might be in any of those places. Rumors about her connections to Bulgarian mobsters range from thinking they're sheltering her, all the way to considering the possibility that they might have taken her out. As of 2022, the only place Ruya is certified to be are the most wanted lists of both the FBI and Europol. Some of OneCoin's diehard followers actually believe that the whole fiasco involving the leaders of OneCoin is a government conspiracy to stop the financial revolution they were about to bring about. Others think that, eventually, Ruya will emerge from the ashes and allow them to collect their earnings, if they're sufficiently faithful. It seems some people never learn. Meet Satish Kumbani, an Indian US citizen and self-proclaimed Asian leader of Bitconnect. Despite having a master's degree in emerging technology and business networks from the University of Greenwich, it seems that Satish still struggles to grasp the basic principles of English, as his self-authored bio on LinkedIn is riddled with spelling and syntax mistakes. However, one thing Satish is excellent at grasping is other people's hard-earned money. On February 15th, 2016, Satish released Bitconnect, which presented itself as an extension of Bitcoin. One of the most common features of altcoins is how much they fluctuate in value. So if you want to market one for its stability, it's a go-to to associate it with Bitcoin. The idea behind Bitconnect was relatively simple. Be a Bitcoin lending platform, and in order to do that, develop an internal token system to keep track of how much interest the Bitcoin holdings you have in your Bitconnect wallet are earning. Bitconnect presented itself as the intermarriage of proof of stake and proof of work consensus mechanisms. This is where I'll try to explain these concepts and accidentally evoke the wrath of an army of demented savants who will point out how I explained it wrong, but here goes. Proof of work, which is the mechanism Bitcoin uses, is based on the amount of computational power that went into generating the units of currency, a process called mining. Meanwhile, proof of stake is based on temporarily locking up your coins in a process called validation, which rewards the people that do so with interest in the form of more units of the coin. Inevitably, this process is skewed towards people who own more of the coin or started owning it earlier, which means that the more coins are generated, the less rewarding it is to actually keep buying into it. What Bitconnect set out to do was get people to put units of a proof of work currency, Bitcoin, into a proof of stake system, which would add to its value over time through the validation process. Of course, like any other Ponzi scheme, this added value was only internally verified, It was just numbers on a screen going up, with nothing external to back it besides the affirmation of the people behind it. Bitconnect's website claims to have Bitcoin robots, also known as an AI that automated the buying and selling of Bitcoin based on calculations about the volatility of the prices. It implied that this was how the coins earned interest, which is basically the same way banks work. You make a deposit, and while they assure you that you can withdraw whenever and that money is yours, they are, at least in theory, investing it and lending it to other people, and you get a cut of whatever the profits of those endeavors are. Be honest, did you expect to learn finance watching a Turkey Tom video? Seriously though, I don't want to get too heady and slash biz on you guys, mostly because I'm mentally disabled and unable to actually do math. So, to put it simply, Bitconnect aims to be a crypto bank, which is obviously contrary to the whole decentralized idea of cryptocurrencies. Bitconnect promised its investors that it could generate significant profits, guaranteeing monthly returns of up to 40% due to how good their automated investments and Bitcoin loans supposedly were. Technically, what Kumbani was doing was selling securities under the guise of an altcoin, which, even for the murky world of cryptocurrencies, definitively qualifies as some kind of illegal from the get-go. For the OGs who were into crypto for decentralized finance purposes, it was obvious how dismal this pitch was. But for the gullible people who saw virtual money as a get-rich-quick scheme, it sounded like Bitcoin with a bonus. Quickly, the investments started pouring in, and people were clearly falling for it hard. One interesting bit of lore is that Satish's homeland, India, was struggling with the proliferation of black markets and the cash that came burgeoning out of them. In order to deal with this, they did something called demonetization, a process that made several banknotes of different denominations void, meaning they were no longer considered legal tender by the government and were worthless. This move was to promote the use of digital money, which was traceable, unlike cash, which Indian officials claimed was being widely used to fund illegal activity and even terrorism. It's either that, or the more likely explanation, that digital money makes it easier for the government to tax transactions and more effectively surveil your spending. Whether these measures worked for curbing criminality or not, they certainly worked to make criminals, and people in general, more adept to crypto. Coincidentally, a few months prior to this happening, Satish had released Bitconnect, which was making the rounds in India, and after the demonetization, aggressively capitalized on people's hasty adoption of cryptocurrencies as their last financial resort. This rush was such that people ignored the fact that the locking period, the time it could take for a withdrawal request of the original deposit to be fulfilled, ranged from 120 to 299 days, meaning people could be made to wait for almost a year to get their money back. At its absolute peak, Bitconnect had a market cap of over $3.4 billion, and an individual coin would be valued at over $400, being the 8th largest cryptocurrency in the world at the time. Its promise of 1% return per day and up to 40% per month meant that you could turn $1,000 into $50 million in 3 years. So of course, anyone with even a mild amount of skepticism began looking at it for what it was: a scam. The creator of Ethereum, Vitalik Buterin, how the fuck do I say that? Vitalik? Are you kidding me? That's made up. Vitalik Buterin would weigh in on Twitter, pointing out that their business model was unsustainable and most likely a Ponzi scheme. Considering that Bitconnect had already hired dozens of multi-level marketing scammers to shill their coin, it was basically a sure thing. Heck, they even went as far as showing a literal pyramid as an example of how their business model worked. How did they get away with this? Well, because Bitconnect ensured that every early adopter of the coin publicly boasted about their earnings with it. Of course, though, this money wasn't coming from profits originating from their trader bot. As a matter of fact, we don't have evidence that such a bot ever existed. The money that the early adopters made, if you can call it that, was just the money that the stooges buying into Bitconnect later on were putting in. Hence the disparity between some people's earnings being astronomical, while many never took off. Despite confirmation of this still being far off, by November of 2017, legal authorities had taken notice and started investigating Bitconnect. The UK Registrar of Companies found the organization suspicious enough to issue an official filing to dissolve their operations in the UK if it failed to prove its legitimacy. While they were looking under Bitconnect's carpet, they found that 75% of the company's shares were owned by a man named Ken Fitzsimmons, whom the site never mentioned whatsoever. This news made Bitconnect Cash, the coin that it had in exchange, plummet to a low of $230. Just a month before, Bitconnect had hosted an event in Thailand that, I'll just let you witness for yourself.
Hey, hey, hey. What's up, Bitconnect? The world is not anymore the way it used to be. No, no, no. Bitconnect! Wow! Bitconnect!
The Ken Fitzsimmons debacle had already succeeded at making Bitconnect look extremely shady, but looking further into its spiral of shell companies revealed another name, Lei T Tianhui. According to the documents filed by said shell companies, there are actually two Lei T Tianhuis, one born in 1978, the other in 1984. Must be a common name in Great Britain. Both Huis also happen to live on the same street, just with different house numbers. Another name that kept popping up was Warda Santoso, whose personal address also shared the same street as the Huis. Imagine the absolute nightmare blunt rotation you'd come across if you walked into the wrong neighborhood in the UK and stumbled into this scam pantheon. Mr. Hui, are you gonna hit that? Taking the Brits' lead, the Texas State Securities Board sent Bitconnect a cease and desist letter. As I mentioned before, the company was technically operating as a security or a bank, but avoiding the regulations in place for the safe operation of one. A week later, the North Carolina Securities Division followed their lead and sent them an identical letter, but including the notion that the people responsible for promoting it should be held as criminals. Because of this verifiably bad news cutting right through Bitconnect's propaganda, the number of new people buying into the currency severely declined. This meant that, soon enough, the project no longer had a steady source of income to pay its early adopters, or to keep funding the minor profit margins its newer clients would receive monthly. Insolvency was on their doorstep. The ending of Bitconnect did justice to its beginning, remaining as dishonest as ever. After a while of their servers being continuously down, probably because they were scrambling for a way out of the bind they put themselves in, they released a memo to everyone subscribed to the project, saying, "We inform all community members that we are closing the Bitconnect lending and exchange platform. We are closing the lending operation immediately with the release of all outstanding loans. The reason for the halt of the lending and exchange platform has many reasons as follows. The continuous bad press has made community members uneasy and created a lack of confidence in the platform. We have received 2 cease and desist letters, one from the Texas State Securities Board and one from the North Carolina Secretary of State Securities Division. These actions have become a hindrance for the legal continuation of the platform. Outside forces have performed DDoS attacks on the platform several times and have made it clear that these will continue. These interruptions in service have made the platform unstable and have created more panic inside the community." This was their way of going down shooting. You gotta appreciate the boldness of actually mentioning these cease and desist letters, but not mentioning the reason those letters were sent in the first place. Another part of their memo mentions that they'd keep Bitconnect X running, which was a spin-off from the initial project, going as far as saying they were planning to keep working on an exchange platform for it on the website. Bitconnect's value dropped below $30, which prompted good-willed people to immediately go to the subreddit and spread a specific hotline to prevent drastic actions over these investors' financial losses, if you know what I mean. It was known at this point that the investment funds were all being transferred to digital wallets owned by Kumbani and his co-conspirators, and that the price of the tokens was fake and exclusively to allure new customers. As aspiring scammers made copycat versions of Bitconnect such as ETHConnect, Satish was arrested and interrogated by the Criminal Investigative Division of the FBI, but he ended up being released. This gave him the opportunity to regroup and, along with his co-conspirators, figure out an exit strategy. After all, they had billions of dollars at their disposal that they were definitely not looking forward to forking over to the federal government. One of the known associates of Satish, Divyesh Darji, was also arrested not only due to his contributions to Bitconnect, but also because of his involvement with another cryptocurrency scam in India, such as Decado and Regal Coin. He was not released on bail and, a while after, he would completely vanish. Unsurprisingly, Satish took the same route as soon as the opportunity presented itself. In 2021, the SEC sued Bitconnect, though they dealt mostly with Glenn Arcaro, the lead promoter of the project in the US. Most of the information we have now about the inner workings of Bitconnect came from this investigation, as Arcaro pled guilty and cooperated. The SEC concluded that Bitconnect had defrauded over $2 billion just from US investors. This meant that the money that came from elsewhere could make the total go way beyond our wildest expectations. The Department of Justice followed this lawsuit up with the indictment of Kumbani on many different charges. But at this point, he was already long gone. If he were to actually face these charges, Satish could be condemned up to 70 years in prison. Unfortunately, it's more likely that Satish is going to spend the rest of his life hiding out on some private island or elite enclave in a third world country, never to be seen again. The media loves success stories like that of Mark Zuckerberg, where a random nerd working out of his garage manages to create something that rivals the big corporations and goes to the moon, so to speak. People just can't resist the loser-turned-billionaire archetype that walks around in stained t-shirts, despite being worth more than entire companies. The problem is that nerds aren't familiar with handling power, so when they get it, they tend to fumble it, or outright abuse it. Case in point, Sam Bankman-Fried. SBF, as he is usually called, was born in 1992 on the campus of Stanford University of all places. This is due to the fact that both of his parents are professors at Stanford, and lawyers too. Unsurprisingly, Sam was the kind of kid who complained that school was boring due to it being too easy for him. Because of this, his parents sent him to the Canada/USA math camp during the summer. His overachieving tendency would get kicked into high gear, and his mom was perplexed at how invested he wasn't managing the puzzle hunts and other games they'd engage in at math camp. He was just 13 at this point, but he was such a prodigy that 5 years later, when the time came for him to go to college, his academic performance allowed him to choose between going to MIT or Caltech, two extremely reputable institutions. After deciding on MIT, he joined a fraternity called Epsilon Theta. Typically, when people hear the word fraternity, they think about beer pong. Of course, Epsilon Theta was the exact opposite of that, with students staying up until late at night on marathons of League of Legends, StarCraft, and chess tournaments. Another person in Epsilon Theta, Gary Wang, was also, coincidentally, an ex-classmate of Sam's from math camp during high school. Gary and Sam hit it off pretty quickly, and though Gary was seen as the smartest person in the fraternity, Sam had a charisma and leadership quality that drew people to him, which is strange considering he looks like an inmate out of a psychiatric hospital. Their partnership continued after Sam graduated from MIT, majoring in physics and minoring in math, though he later claimed they were useless degrees. Nothing I learned in college ended up being useful other than social development. On the academic side though, it's all fucking useless. School is just not helpful for most jobs, everyone knows it's true. Some people kind of don't really want to say it's true, but it just is. Meanwhile, around his sophomore year, Sam began blogging. Besides essays about baseball, which for whatever reason, he seemed actually competent at analyzing, his posts consisted of him spurging out about politics and philosophy, and were usually centered around utilitarianism. As it turns out, his parents also identified as utilitarians. In one of his very first posts, he identified himself as a total, hedonistic, one-level, classical utilitarian. I could try to explain what each of those terms mean, but for the preservation of both your time and my sanity, it's easier and more effective for me to just say that philosophy is astrology for college geeks. So we'll leave it at that, I guess. These theoretical fixations of his eventually landed him at a lecture by Will Macaskill on the concept of effective altruism. The basic gist of effective altruism, as put by Sam himself, is the idea of bringing the greatest good to the maximum number of people as effectively as possible, meaning without wasting resources. For Sam, practicing this meant making ridiculous amounts of money in morally neutral endeavors that he would then use to fund charity causes. He would soon also become a vegan, as his utilitarian ethics included animal suffering in its calculations. Soon after this shift manifested, he'd become an intern at Jane Street Capital, a Wall Street quant firm, quant meaning math-heavy, for those of you who didn't watch The Big Short. According to Nishad Singh, another of SBF's acquaintances, trading was one of the very few activities that prevented him from being bored, which is why he liked it so much. This too was an example of the apple not falling far from the tree, as Sam's brother Gabriel was also a Wall Street trader at one point in time. After Sam graduated, in 2014, he began working as a trader for Jane Street Capital full-time, a position he held for a little over 3 years, a time during which, according to him, he gave more than half of all of his earnings to charities. However, in 2017, things would once again begin shifting for Sam. During his first vacation in years, he started considering alternatives to continuing his work for Jane Street. For a couple of months, he tried out working for the Center of Effective Altruism as a director of development. Eventually, his knack for crunching numbers got the best of him because he returned to trading. However, this time, he would be working for himself, opening his own company, Alameda Research. Though the website for the company is currently private, its LinkedIn page is still functional, and it tells us that Alameda Research was centered around cryptocurrencies instead of conventional stocks. This was out of left field for Sam, who knew literally nothing about crypto up until this point. None of his acquaintances knew anything about it either. Nobody except Gary Wang, who was familiar with coding and wrote a Bitcoin trading bot in 2014 that had netted him a few $1,000s. Gary soon quit his job working for Google to go work for Alameda. The initial strategy was relatively simple, though I'm probably going to butcher it due to my lack of knowledge and IQ points. Basically, they could sell Bitcoin to Japanese traders at a larger profit due to certain regional circumstances, and they'd consistently be at an advantage over the people who were trading blindly. After overcoming a few hurdles over the span of 2 years, Sam and Gary made about $20 million. Though nothing to scoff at, it would pale in comparison to the amount of money they were about to walk into. In early 2018, however, the money slowed down significantly for unknown reasons. though it probably has something to do with Bitcoin's value going down worldwide. Regardless, Alameda was genuinely trying to troubleshoot the issue of liquidity for crypto exchanges, as in figuring out how to make more reliable the process of exchanging cryptocurrencies for normal currencies. So, in the realm of crypto, this is one of the highest ambitions you could surmise, so Sam and Gary decided that, if they were going to do this, they would have to go above and beyond the Call of Duty, even if it meant risking the stable and profitable workings of Alameda. In late 2018, SBF attended a crypto conference in China in the hopes that someone had made progress in the way of exchanges, when said hopes were drastically let down, as exchanges were losing an average of $1 million a day to customer assets due to the issues Sam had pinpointed. He and Gary decided to hold themselves up in Hong Kong indefinitely until they had developed something to solve this issue. By 2019, they registered an LLC in Antigua and Barbuda of all places, under the name FTX. FTX, short for Futures Exchange, was to be a crypto exchange that aggregated other financial entities, including Alameda, as their liquidity providers. This meant they'd work towards facilitating the conversion of crypto into currency by providing the capital themselves and eating the risk. According to Sam, FTX didn't have to depend on Alameda for long, as soon other liquidity providers got on board. Not long after it began doing business in April of 2019, FTX's daily trading volume was in the range of $13 billion, while Alameda was making about $1 million a day. Because of this meteoric rise, the company went from a behind-the-scenes crypto tech service to quickly developing a media-friendly face, even doing things like sponsoring League of Legends championships. SBF's fortune increased exponentially, leading him to donate roughly $35 million to charities around the world. His employees, who were also ineffective altruists, donated another 10 on top of that, and this was just one of FTX's many massive donations. Sam also donated a little over $5 million to Joe Biden's presidential campaign. His support for the Democratic Party didn't stop there, as he also joined the ranks of Facebook co-founder Dustin Moskovitz and former Google CEO Eric Schmidt in the Future Forward Super PAC for the Democratic Party, which raised $150 million in 2020 alone. As you could expect, this sent the media into a frenzy, and reporters were tripping over themselves to venerate SBF as the crypto finance messiah, as Forbes reported on his net worth being roughly $22 billion as of 2021. Their unabashed love for him was partly because Bitcoin maximalists and NFTs were making crypto look bad in the public eye, and they were scrambling for someone to save decentralized finance's PR. SBF fit that role perfectly because, despite being ludicrously rich from crypto, he wasn't a crypto bro by any means, nor was he particularly invested in the ideology of it. He was just looking to make money. Just a few months later, Business Insider reported on his net worth having jumped up to $26.5 billion. Among the many things FTX did with its money were certainly publicity stunts, such as spending around $150 million to rename the Miami Heat Arena to FTX Arena, and the football field at UC Berkeley to FTX Field. Not very creative, but probably effective at spreading the word. Another whopping $30 million went into hiring celebrities like Kevin O'Leary, David Ortiz, Naomi Osaka, and Tom Brady to be ambassadors for FTX. While all of this opulence was accruing around Sam, the image he presented was the same one as always: casually dressed, still living in a dorm with his colleagues, and sleeping in a beanbag for 4 hours a night like an overworked college student. FTX, on the other hand, had already surpassed Twitter, Nasdaq, and Deutsche Bank in value, a staggering reality considering that FTX had just about 250 employees, while Deutsche had more than 80,000. This was as large an anomaly as you could fathom. Every journalist was calling him the modern-day Robin Hood, while the unending carousel of celebrity endorsements kept spinning tirelessly. FTX was being endorsed by basketball players like Steph Curry and Shaquille O'Neal, who had Sam over to his house for lunch. He also got invited to a dinner that would be attended by Sia, Jeff Bezos, Leonardo DiCaprio, Kate Hudson, and Katy Perry. I don't even want to imagine the kind of eyes wide shut stuff that must have been going on there. Though SBF's charm seemingly never wore thin for the establishment, regular people started seeing through the guy who played mobile games on his phone while doing interviews and began wondering how trustworthy his business really was. One of the main points of contention was that the majority of his net worth was evaluated based on the stake that he held in his own company, which wasn't actually backed by any assets. After all, there is a reason why every major financial institution always stores its wealth in a multitude of diversified assets. Another criticism levied against him was that, for all the hype about him being some kind of workaholic saint who thought sleep was a luxury he didn't need because he had lives to save, he didn't actually do that much charity when you compare it to how much money he's keeping. He spent exponentially more money on renaming arenas ballerinas than feeding the poor. Additionally, the place he was sharing with his colleagues wasn't exactly a dorm room. It was a penthouse at the most expensive resort in the Bahamas. Of course, this was all explained away with the claim that, once he was done maximizing the potential of FTX, he would go all in on philanthropic endeavors. Other criticisms of SBF included the suspicion that he could be giving privileges to Alameda, seeing as he was still the majority stakeholder of it and stood to profit if that was the case. His defense for this was that he welcomed and actively invited regulatory activity into his business. Well, I should specify, he said he supported bigger crypto regulations. As for actually complying with them, we'll find out soon. Come 2022, and after attending hearings in the Senate and Congress, SBF was promising up to $1 billion in charity, his top priority being pandemic preparedness. In April, Sam would preside over the first edition of the Crypto Bahamas Conference, where he did a panel with Tony Blair and Bill Clinton. Just a little while later, he pledged a value of at least $100 million to prevent Donald Trump from winning the 2024 elections, with a soft ceiling of $1 billion. A figure he would later back away from. This same year, he would also donate almost $40 million to the Democratic Party for the midterms, cementing him as the second biggest donor, only behind George Soros. Later on that year, the crypto market crashed across the board, with companies like Coinbase having its shares depreciate to the tune of 70%, and Bitcoin losing over half its value. Supposedly, because FTX's stock wasn't publicly traded, they remained widely protected from this catastrophe, managing to even expand their business during the financial turmoil. Or did they? Around as late as September 2022, people were still looking at FTX like it was the Noah's Ark of crypto that would just roll with the punches, no matter how hard it got hit. After this, FTX had a relatively quiet October, where Sam announced they were working on creating a stablecoin, meaning a cryptocurrency whose value is tied to another asset. Absolutely no one was expecting what was about to come at them. On November 7th, it was announced that Binance, the largest exchange and competitor of FTX, would sell all of their holdings of FTX's token, FTT. The CEO of Binance, Zhao Changpeng, took to Twitter to explain his seemingly radical decision, saying, "As a part of Binance's exit from FTX equity last year, Binance received roughly $2.1 billion USD equivalent in cash, Binance USD, and FTT. Due to recent revelations that have come to light, we have decided to liquidate any remaining FTT on our books. We will try to do so in a way that minimizes market impact. Due to market conditions and limited liquidity, we expect this will take a few months to complete." This statement might not sound harsh, but it set off alarm bells in the heads of every investor as soon as the phrase "recent revelations" was uttered. Though initially, it was unknown what Zhao was referring to, eventually people connected the dots that this had something to do with a story ran by CoinDesk about a week prior. It mentioned the fact that, despite supposedly being completely independent entities, Alameda was holding onto $14.6 billion worth of assets in FTT as of June that year. This looked bad because FTT's value wasn't backed by any real asset besides the prices people were willing to buy it at. And since Alameda, which was essentially its sister company, owned so much of it, it meant that its value was artificially inflated, and FTT was one big bubble. Zhao was not the first person to hypothesize this, but he was by far the biggest person in finance to do it, and be willing to put the weight of his entire company behind it. As his move to liquidate his holdings in FTT made the rounds, people started withdrawing en masse, and began worrying when it was taking much longer than expected for the money to be withdrawn. SBF commented on the situation on his Twitter account, saying, "A competitor is trying to go after us with false rumors. FTX is fine, assets are fine. FTX has enough to cover all client holdings. We don't invest client assets, even in treasuries. We have been processing all withdrawals and will continue to be. It's heavily regulated, even when that slows us down. We have a long history of safeguarding client assets, and that remains true today. I'd love it, at CZ_Binance, if we could work together for the ecosystem." This confidence tone wouldn't last long at all. Just a day later, the unimaginable happened. Not only was there a liquidity crisis at FTX, but they asked for Binance's help to provide it for them. At this point, FTT lost 80% of its value, and there were roughly $6 billion worth of withdrawals needing to be fulfilled. In order to try and get people their money, SBF entered into a non-binding agreement for FTX to be acquired in its entirety by Binance. However small a hope this gave people that FTX would somehow be able to pull through, it would instantly be crushed. Since Zhao announced that announcing this accusation did nothing to slow down the disintegration of FTT, he decided on backing away from the agreement. This was every investor's nightmare come true, since now the billions that FTX was supposed to cough up had nowhere to come from. By November 9th, the other shoe dropped, and FTX's website was saying it was no longer processing withdrawals at all. The whole purpose of the company, providing liquidity, is exactly what was decimating it. Within days, SBF was no longer considered a billionaire, and apparently, the SEC had already been investigating FTX before all of this went down. It seemed like every day a new and worse piece of information came out. While SBF was scrambling for any potential candidate for raising capital to pay people back, Alameda ceased its operations. This was convenient timing since, concurrently, it was discovered that, while FTX itself wasn't making any investments with customers' money, it had loaned $10 billion to Alameda. Supposedly, this was to cover Alameda's liabilities, but the fact that all of this was done without notifying anybody cemented the shady nature of SBF's business practices. At the heart of it, they had done exactly what they said they wouldn't by means of a pathetic technicality. Anonymous sources from inside Alameda would confirm that the CEO, Caroline Ellison, who was rumored to be Sam's love interest, had disclosed that these money transfers weren't some kind of unplanned anomaly, but knowingly performed by Sam, Gary, herself, and the director of engineering, Nishad Singh. By November 11th, over 100 affiliates and subsidiaries of FTX, including the main company itself, had filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. This halted the regular functions of the company, while someone else was put in the position of CEO to quarter the company's assets off in whatever way they could to pay the debt. On the same day, almost $400 million were stolen from FTX via unauthorized transactions, which SBF pinned on either malware or a scorned ex-employee taking advantage of the chaos. A day later, Sam was questioned by the Royal Bahamas Police Force. As the walls were closing in on him, he posted a long string of tweets addressing the apocalyptic circumstances FTX found itself in, saying, "My goal, my one goal, is to do right by customers. I'm contributing what I can to doing so. I'm meeting in person with regulators and working with the teams to do what we can for customers." A few weeks ago, FTX was handling roughly $10 billion a day of volume and billions of transfers, but there was too much leverage, more than I realized. A run on the bank and market crash exhausted liquidity. So what can I try to do? Raise liquidity, make customers whole, and restart. This was a surprisingly motivated approach for someone whose company was more or less in $10 billion of debt. As he said himself, FTX's assets were supposed to cover it, but when there's no way to convert those assets into actual money, they're worthless. Overall, this thread felt like the same kind of vapid and deceptive optimism Sam showed when he was pretending that the crypto market crash hadn't affected FTX, or that its assets were fine. Amidst the very long thread, he also mentioned that a conversation he had with a friend of his over Twitter DMs had been leaked without his knowledge. Unlike the thread, the DM conversations had a much more honest tone, and did a way better job of explaining what actually happened. Here are a few highlights. Anonymous friend, you said a lot of stuff about how you wanted to make regulations just good ones. Was that pretty much just PR too? Yeah, just PR. F regulators. They make everything worse. They don't protect customers at all. When the topic of ethics in business came up, Sam also pitched in his 2 cents. Anonymous friend, I was just re-listening to that conversation we had this summer about whether you should do unethical things for the greater good. You were like, nah, don't do unethical things, and there's a risk of doing more harm than good. But even if you subtract that out, pretty not worth it. I was trying to figure out if that was kind of the PR off-the-cuff answer. Sam, man, all the dumb stuff I said, it's not true, really. Everyone goes around pretending that perception reflects reality. It doesn't. I can see why you didn't give that answer in interviews, so the ethics stuff mostly up front? People will like you if you win and hate you if you lose, and that's how it all really works? Sam, yeah, I mean, that's not all of it, but it's a lot. Friend, you were really good at talking about ethics for someone who saw it all as a game with winners and losers. Sam, yeah, I had to be. It's what reputations are made of, to some extent. I feel bad for those who get screwed by this dumb game we, woke Westerners, play, where we say all the right shibboleths and so everyone likes us. For your information, shibboleth is a word in biblical Hebrew, which you were asked to pronounce correctly in order to prove that you were an Israelite. Over the course of history, it took on the meaning of any set of words that, when uttered properly, would prove someone's allegiance. In this conversation, Sam was openly admitting that, when people weren't looking, he felt no need to be ethical or stick to the promises he'd made. The conversation quickly came to an end as Sam's anonymous correspondent began asking about the details of how things went so sour with FTX. Anonymous friend, you tweeted out some stuff like, "We never invest your deposits." That was BS, right? SBF, it was factually accurate. But their deposits were totally not there. Do you mean technically it was Alameda? Correct. So FTX technically wasn't gambling with their money. FTX had just loaned their money to Alameda, who gambled their money and lost it. And you didn't realize it was a big deal because you didn't realize how much money it was. Sam, and also thought Alameda had enough collateral to reasonably cover it. Friend, I get how you could have gotten away with it, but I guess that seems sketchy even if you get away with it. Sam, it was never the intention. Sometimes life creeps up on you. Life creeps up on you. That's one way to explain how you end up losing billions of dollars of your customers' money. He continues, "You know what was maybe my biggest mistake? The one thing everyone told me to do? Chapter 11. If I hadn't done that, withdrawals would be opening up in a month with customers fully whole, but instead I filed, and the people in charge of it are trying to burn it all to the ground out of shame. I might still get there. Basically, we get there if either Gary or Nishad comes back and we can win a jurisdictional battle against Delaware. Friend. Gary and Nishad are gone? Sam. Yeah, scared. Or Gary is scared. Nishad is ashamed and guilty." Up until this point, Sam's partners in crime were mostly overlooked, but now they were facing heavy scrutiny. While Gary was implicated through FTX alongside Sam, Nishad had received a loan of $500 million through Alameda. The amount of irregularities discovered was monumental. As John J. Ray, the person in charge of the liquidation of FTX, ruffled through the company, he would say, "Never in my career have I seen such a complete failure of corporate controls and such a complete absence of trustworthy financial information as occurred here. From compromised systems integrity and faulty regulatory oversight abroad to the concentration of control in the hands of a very small group of inexperienced, unsophisticated, and potentially compromised individuals, this situation is unprecedented. Corporate funds of FTX Group were used to buy homes and other personal items for employees. Some of the real estate was recorded in the personal names of employees and FTX advisors. Literally, there's no record keeping whatsoever. Imagine getting roasted on your organizational skills by the guy who's dismembering your company." I won't get into the specifics of what companies and celebrities had money tied up in FTX, simply because there are too many to name. What's essential is that, in December, Sam would be arrested and charged with fraud, conspiracy to commit money laundering, and conspiracy to defraud the US and violate campaign finance laws, the gravity of which set his bail at $250 million, and he was immediately put on house arrest. As Sam's potential time in prison could amount to a whopping 115 years, every single one of his business partners pled guilty and began working with civil authorities on getting some kind of deal. Meanwhile, Sam is pleading not guilty. Because of how recent these events are, the jury is quite literally still out, and only time will tell how this story will end for any of them. In the ancient times of 2016, the golden age of commentary YouTube, which I'm just now having the dark realization was 7 years ago. Guys, I'm getting old. There was a scandal involving the website csgolotto.com. It turned out it was owned by the very people promoting it on YouTube to millions of viewers without disclosing it as an advertisement. This event, even if minor relative to the other happenings of the time, brought up the pernicious question about the morality of shilling what was essentially gambling to very young consumers. Here we are, over half a decade later, and live streaming yourself gambling is still a major genre of content, and the debate continues. Is it okay to encourage that kind of behavior to your young audience? Many have posited that the only reason this category doesn't get cracked down on is that it makes the platforms more money than they risk losing from keeping them on. It gets even messier when you factor in other variables, such as promoting a certain investment opportunity without doing due diligence to ensure it's a legitimate endeavor. Recently, iShowSpeed, the biggest Cristiano Ronaldo fan on earth, found himself in hot water because of this. On November 16th, 2022, he did a live stream wherein he met up with a Cristiano Ronaldo lookalike and gave away PS5s. However, the entire stream took place in what looked like the headquarters or studio of the altcoin Paradox Metaverse Crypto, with everyone, including Speed, wearing merch emblazoned with the Paradox logo. Throughout the stream, Speed directly claims it's gonna go to the moon, meaning the value of the crypto Paradox will skyrocket. It becomes particularly egregious when it's explained that, in order to get a shot at the PS5 giveaway, the viewers need to follow the Paradox Twitter account. For a few instances during the live stream, the audio would get muted, when in actuality it was just very low. The same day as the stream VOD went up, people uploaded those segments with the audio enhanced, and the instructions Speed was receiving from the people behind it became audible. In and of itself, pushing a crypto on your audience, which is majority underage, is ethically dubious. Unbeknownst to Speed, this move would come back to bite him in the very same stream. Not only were people calling him a sellout for doing such blatant advertisements, the coin started being called a scam by chat en masse.
You know what I'm saying?
None of us are trolling Speed, these guys are scammer.
That's crazy, bro. Those are to that dumbass comment, bro. Seriously.
In the enhanced audio clips, we can hear someone from the Paradox team stressing out about the supposedly $10 million worth of a campaign, culminating in the chat being spammed with claims that they were scammers and asking Speed to shut it down, which he complied with, setting it to members only. As you can imagine, the hate was just as present in the YouTube comments of the VOD as it was during the Twitch stream. Though the VOD is no longer up, some screenshots remain, and it seems like many comments were copy-pasted from one another, saying things like, "I show pump and dump, this stream changed my life. My entire view of everything that exists in this world, in fact, even in the entire universe. I can never look at anything I know the same way again. This stream represents emotions that most humans could never understand, but I can. Thanks to this stream, I was awakened to many things previously considered unimaginable. Thank you for this exquisite stream. I will never forget this experience." Regardless of comments like that, the damage was done and irreversible, and within hours of it finishing up, Twitch streamer Moist Critical, who caught most of the stream while it was happening, forwarded the VOD to YouTuber CoffeeZilla, who instantly took interest and began researching not only the coin, but also the entire company and people who were behind it, which opened a much larger can of worms. Paradox is run primarily by the guys we saw on Speed's stream, namely Amio Talio and Facial Tariq. While Amio is doing his own version of Hustlers University.
This is the only way to get rich in 2022 without starting up a business from scratch. For every person that you refer to Amio Talio University, you get £15.
Smoking cigars in front of cars and the whole 9 yards. Facial owns a couple of weird-looking companies that are, respectively, a taxi service and a supercar rental. The first one having little to no online presence, and the latter, a website with the lorem ipsum text, which is the filler text that Weebly or WordPress puts on your site before you edit it, unedited on the site. Amazing. If that wasn't enough, half the company is owned by Rashid Belhassa, also known as Money Kicks on his YouTube account that has almost 4 million subs. His claim to fame is, basically, being the son of a Dubai billionaire, Saif Ahmed Belhassa, who is responsible for funding his YouTube channel, even though Rashad claims to be a businessman himself. Not sure exactly what his business is, besides his one attempt at professional boxing, which he lost to a guy that had lost 3 out of 4 of the fights on his record. This didn't stop him from supposedly getting to the last stage of setting up a fight with Floyd Mayweather, with this hilariously bad photoshopped image attached. As for the coin, here is the graph of its value. As we can see, at its highest peak ever, it was worth precisely 1 cent, followed by a massive drop and continued loss of value to this day, now being worth a fifth of 1 cent. People have speculated on this being a pump and dump scheme, meaning a worthless coin that the creators hold massive amounts of, and when they trick a large number of people into buying into it, they sell it all at once, dumping the value instantly. Even if it's not a scam in the conventional sense, it's a piece of garbage project that they were promising would multiply investments by 10 to 100 times, which is very, very unlikely. But that's not all. It turns out they had other projects, such as an indie game that is allegedly AAA standard quality, even though it has assets blatantly ripped straight from the Unreal Engine. This pseudo game is nothing other than a play-to-earn NFT project, as in, you have to complete certain missions in-game in order to earn money, but not actual dollars you can spend. You see, you earn paracoins. Just like the previous Ponzi schemes I explained, you only ever get worthless internal coins that never materialize into actual money. Within a day of the stream taking place, CoffeeZilla managed to convince Thing 1 and Thing 2 to go on a stream discussion with him on whether their business was a scam or not. I have no idea what drove them to do this, considering the entire thing ranges from embarrassing to rage-inducing as they continually deflect his questions. Eventually, he confronts them about the ridiculous 10 to 100x claims, which they doubled down on, claiming it's not a get-rich-quick scheme, and buyers might actually make that money back. While he kept putting the pressure on them over it, Amio accused him of being racist. Along with all this hoopla, Speed came out and supposedly apologized for supporting Paradox, though he didn't do that much apologizing. While he did admit to making a little mistake due to not being smart enough, most of his addressing of the situation can be boiled down to him trying his best to save face. In another clip, his attitude is the same and he seems to just not want to address it in the first place. More so, he seems angry that people are complaining about it and calling him iShow Scam. The same day, Twitch streamer Asmongold reacted to the fiasco, and a day later, Critical also chimed in. The pressure was mounting, and it seemed like it wouldn't let up anytime soon. But within a week or so, he decided to take down the VOD, and slowly, the stigma of being a scammer would fall back off of him. Meanwhile, Amio Talio posted a video response to the allegations that Paradox was a scam, consisting of little more than what he'd already told CoffeeZilla on their livestream, obviously to no avail. One of the things he kept coming back to was the idea that everyone calling it a scam were bots, but obviously, he had no proof of this and resorted to speculation. The engagement of the video was so negative that he decided to turn the comments off, which just worked to make the attempt to damage control the Speed situation even more pathetic. But this wasn't the end of Amio Talio's crusade to completely annihilate any semblance of respectability he or his company had. Within a week of the scandal, he'd pick a random critic of Paradox out of a hat, namely Naeem UTD2, and start sending him threats of violence through Snapchat audios. On a story of his, he'd post a picture of Naeem's profile with the title, "5K to the person who grabs this guy and brings him to me. I want to see this troll in real life. He's from Redacted, and send his mom's address." These threats were later confirmed as real by Facile on Discord, who, when asked about it, indirectly proved the authenticity of the audios, saying, "Just a futter getting told off, nothing to worry about. Each of them has contacted us to pay them to remove the posts. Isn't that called blackmailing?" To this day, this accusation of blackmail has never been substantiated in any way. Fortunately, nothing came of these threats, and though Amio has gone inactive on YouTube, he is still pushing this absolute trash on TikTok and Instagram to whomever is willing to listen. It seems like he is just one of the many rich guys who try to buy their way into public appeal by associating with web celebrities. For example, he has a post where he's supposedly yucking it up with a clearly unsettled Logan Paul. Oh, and speaking of Logan Paul, I genuinely try not to be in the business of beating dead horses, but it's quite difficult to stop when said horses keep sporadically coming back to life to do more egregious and indefensible things that just fit perfectly in my videos. I mean, in the words of Vosh, the horse was asking for it. It's so weird to see YouTubers from years ago that are still active, because you can draw a timeline connecting their past actions to the present. For example, Logan Paul. From exaggerating his colorblindness for views, to his song saying some chubby kid was potentially the next Martin Luther King, to the Japanese forest incident, which I cannot name in completion for obvious reasons, which then originated the severe and continuous lapse in my judgment meme. After his rebrand into slightly more adult-oriented content, along with boxing Floyd Mayweather and doing a podcast with Alex Jones, people thought he couldn't ever outdo himself. Once again, Logan Paul proves everyone wrong. In the middle of August 2021, during a regular recording of the Impulsive podcast, Logan took the opportunity to announce the release date for his NFT project, Crypto Zoo, which, according to him, he'd spent the last 6 months working on and put $1 million into. If that sounds like a lot, apparently a lot of it went to paying artists that would draw the art for the tokens by hand, as opposed to the typical algorithmically generated digital art that is associated with NFTs. Additionally, it wasn't just a project, but an actual video game, or so Logan said. It was supposed to be a play-to-earn game, where you could make hybrids of animals, trade them, and earn passive income from holding them. Of course, this passive income would be in zoo coins. In order to begin playing this game, you would need to pay actual real money to buy an animal egg. It's like an unplayable Ponzi scheme version of Pokemon Go, to put it in layman's terms. Before the game was even available to play, the eggs became available for purchase, and immediately, people from his audience bought millions of dollars worth of them. On the 1st of September, the day the tokens launched, the trading volume hit a whopping 45 million. Overall, people had invested over $2.5 million into the tokens themselves, culminating in the project hitting a $2 billion market cap. However promising any of this looked at the time, it was essentially like when Wile E. Coyote sprints off a cliff and takes a little while to notice there is no ground beneath him. A few days after the initial launch, the art for the tokens was released, and contrary to popular belief, they turned out to be extremely detailed pieces of fine art that completely redeemed the project and changed everyone's public perception of not just Logan Paul, but the entire NFT market. Just kidding, he lied. They weren't original handmade assets, they were pathetic Photoshop edits of Adobe stock photos of animals that definitely could not have taken a week, let alone 6 months to make. Ben Roth, the administrator of the project, took to Telegram to make the obviously deceptive claim that they weren't Adobe stock, when they certainly were. So, if all of that money couldn't have gone into the art, where did it go exactly? It didn't just go into developing some kind of extremely advanced blockchain. Since the contract wasn't simple, it was straight up identical to other NFTs, a fact discovered by CoffeeZilla, who audited the smart contract. Just within the month of September, when the launch occurred, they changed contracts twice, after the $1 million claim had been repeated many times. After a couple of redundant AMAs, the month of November came, and that's when the eggs would hatch and become animals. The aforementioned CoffeeZilla, in his crusade to scrutinize the ins and outs of the project, also interviewed multiple investors of Crypto Zoo. In doing this, he discovered that the dysfunction was generalized. Some people, despite properly having the eggs in their wallet, were simply not allowed to hatch them without explanation. Others did manage to hatch them, but never got to trade them or earn the passive income yield they were promised. As it turned out, it wasn't even written into the contract, despite everything being said by the people promoting the coin. Because of the disillusionment people experienced seeing how ragtag the project was, especially due to how much money some people had shelled out for it, the price dropped radically in the days following the hatch. While Logan silently backed away from the project, Ben would continually keep up appearances in the Discord server for CryptoZoo, promising Logan would eventually come back, riding a white horse and saving everyone's wallets by marketing the project and turning it into a success. Meanwhile, the value continued to tank month after month, as certain people who were disaffected by the way the project was abandoned began pressing Logan to address it. He did in a few instances during early 2022. In one particularly expository moment during a Twitter space, he claims that he and his team had an issue with selecting the right people to work on the projects they had going on. Then, he mentions CryptoZoo by name, claiming that the lead developer for it fled to Switzerland with the code for the CryptoZoo game and held it hostage for $1 million. Though he doesn't name the person who did this, he does say that he is working retroactively to fix CryptoZoo to salvage what's left of the investors. When the mystery developer was asked about this claim from Logan, the developer did admit to holding the code hostage, though what he actually did was make the source code private until he and his team of 30 engineers, who allegedly were burning roughly $50,000 a month to make the game, got some semblance of payment. Can't blame Logan though. I'm sure publicly claiming you just spent $1 million is a lot more fun than actually spending it. Another developer was also contacted, only to say that he wasn't paid for his work whatsoever. When CoffeeZilla, who at this point is undeniably the protagonist of this story, decided to take this stuff up to Logan Paul's manager, Jeff Levin, no information was given out besides a vague threat of a lawsuit. It's at this point the entire situation is submerged into a mire of he said, she said, from which we can only glean a few deductions here and there due to the sheer lack of public info about it. Basically, as the lawyers are peeled back from the catastrophe they're calling CryptoZoo, it turns out that Logan Paul, his manager, and the dev team not delivering the game is pretty much the tip of the iceberg, however harmful their incompetence and disorganization may have been. In the wake of CoffeeZilla's trilogy of videos on CryptoZoo, Logan would tweet, "While I generally appreciate Steven's creative genius and exceptional work ethic, I mean that this one is simply not true. When appropriate, all bad actors will be exposed, explained, and held fully accountable. I'll speak further on Impulsive January 3rd. He would pair this announcement with a public invitation for CoffeeZilla to go on his podcast. A little later, on December 31st, 2022, Logan Paul would post to the CryptoZoo Discord saying, "Long time no see. Hope y'all have a wonderful New Year's Eve. We'll start 2023 with a bang." It seemed that the fire pit had been stoked for the first time in well over a year. Finally, January 3rd would come, and Logan Paul uploaded a video addressing the videos and allegations CoffeeZilla had posted to YouTube. In it, he would reveal that Zach Kelling, the lead developer whom CoffeeZilla didn't name, had priors for felonies such as armed robbery. On top of that, Logan claimed that Zach was lying about the $50,000 a week and 30 engineers, positing instead that he only had 3 employees. Logan goes on to explain that the person who was in charge of the vetting process for the CryptoZoo team was Eddie Ibanez. This part of Logan's video goes pretty much in line with CoffeeZilla's findings, since they both agree on the fact that Eddie is an unbelievably successful con man and pathological liar with an insane track record of misdeeds, including but not limited to tricking at least one higher up at the NFL into thinking he helped the Eagles win a Super Bowl, claiming he was employed by the CIA to track terrorists and getting a loan for $1.5 million, as his company was failing due to the fact that, well, he's a con man. Logan concurred with yet another of Coffee's discoveries, that Jake Greenbaum, also known as the Crypto King and advisor to CryptoZoo, was a bad actor with nothing but financial gain on his sites. What happened was that CryptoZoo was stealth launched a couple months in advance of its announcement so that Logan, his manager, Eddie, and Jake could buy the tokens in bulk before they became popularized without getting in trouble with the SEC. The only problem is that Jake started trading it beforehand through sock puppet wallets, and once it launched, when no one from the CryptoZoo team was technically allowed to sell their tokens, he dumped them in order to profit. According to the shared estimations of Logan and Coffee, Jake left the project with up to $6 million, while Eddie left with almost $2 million. Meanwhile, neither Logan or his manager ever sold any of their tokens, as can be proven by verifying their wallets. Additionally, Logan went after some of the people CoffeeZilla interviewed as supposed victims of the CryptoZoo scam, alleging that one of them, Emilio, was himself responsible for a couple of crypto rug pulls. He also accuses Coffee of having done something illegal and recording his conversation with Jeff, Logan's manager, without his consent or knowledge. He concludes the video with more affirmations that CryptoZoo will be finished and properly released no matter how much it costs to him, and that CoffeeZilla should expect a defamation lawsuit. Thankfully, just a few days later, Logan would walk back his threats of legal action, though it's unknown whether this was done because he genuinely reflected on this and decided against it, or because he was advised to do so by his lawyers who didn't see a positive outcome of the lawsuit. After deleting his response to CoffeeZilla, he went on Discord to say, "Hey y'all, just wanted to update you. I deleted my initial response to Coffee's series. It was rash and misaligned with the true issue at hand, so I called him today and apologized. The war is not with Coffee. In fact, I'm grateful he brought this to light. I will be taking accountability, apologizing, and coming forward with a plan in the near future. Thank you all for believing in this project and sticking with me. I know it's been bumpy, but your support is everything to me, and I will make this right." On January 13th, Logan uploaded a video titled, "Thank You CoffeeZilla," where he would publicly formalize his regret for having attacked CoffeeZilla as he'd done previously. He would also announce what he called a 3-step program to remedy the damage caused by CryptoZoo, which included burning his and his manager's holdings in the coin, committing well over $1 million to, essentially, refunding the people who had bought eggs at mint value, which was 0.1 Ethereum per egg. Last but not least, Logan also reiterated that his intentions never changed, and he wants to finish the game and deliver it to the people who are waiting on it to this day. He tacks onto this that legal actions against the aforementioned bad actors are being actively pursued, and whatever money they manage to siphon out of them will go directly back to the CryptoZoo community, ideally to make them whole. Within a week of Logan's final apology, CoffeeZilla once again covered it on his channel, pointing out that, regardless of Logan's intentions being seemingly good, a lot of ground was left uncovered, such as the people who sold the coin at a loss when they thought the project was completely abandoned, or the people who just bought the in-game coin as opposed to eggs, which constituted a pretty significant volume of money, were not to expect any kind of refund. As of the writing of this video, there is a website and a couple of social media accounts set up for it, so it seems that the game might yet eventually come out, though it's unknown to what avail it will be. Ultimately, we have no way of knowing how genuine or good intention Logan and his manager are in regards to trying to fix the fallout of CryptoZoo, but since this is still a technically ongoing situation, time will certainly tell. People want to get that bag by any means necessary. I get it. Who doesn't want money? Everyone wants a uselessly expensive gaming rig or an absurdly overpriced car that looks like a Razer mouse. But is it too much to ask to not break the law and rob people blind on your way to get that bread? I certainly would enjoy drifting around wet streets at 125 miles per hour in a custom-made V8 plastic piece of shit, but I wouldn't go around lying to kids and tricking gullible people into forking over their own life savings for their own supercar over it. On second thought, maybe I would. I'd do it all for the Bugatti. Especially with the risks involved, you're not going to be able to spend all that money when everyone is just waiting for you to slip up or get in trouble with the law. Sometimes I feel like the fact that these people make money off of being pathological liars is almost accidental. Mostly, they just enjoy making fools out of unsuspecting civilians who fall for their scams. I guess the moral of today's video is, if someone is telling you that you can make some easy money, it doesn't matter how reputable or decent they look, they're most likely trying to empty your bank account into their own. Regardless, I've been Turkey Tom. Thanks for watching, and until next time, invest into Turkey Tom coin today. All you gotta do is subscribe. Leave me alone.
Times before, and it's just not that funny anymore.